This story is about an ordinary goblin. The story begins as this goblin and his friends are chasing several wild boars to roast them later. After a couple of minutes of chasing, our goblin and his whole gang finally drove these pigs into a trap and caught them. The goblins immediately began to rejoice because before that they did not believe that such a primitive trap would help them in the hunt. And our main character said that from the very beginning it was obvious to him that everything would work. Because it was he who came up with this trap, the rest of the goblins began to laugh and did not understand how their brother could think of such a thing. The goblin with white hair smiled and proudly charged that he was an inventor. So there is nothing surprising here because this is his calling. And his girlfriend immediately started laughing and saying that he was a worthless inventor, because half of his inventions didn't even work. The guy said that, unlike everyone else, he is trying to invent something. And for him, trial and error is the second Bible. The rest of the goblins stopped laughing and began to say that this is the real truth because Nog is the only goblin who creates something new. And even though it happens that something does not work for him, it is still very impressive. Our hero laughed very hard and thanked his friends for supporting him. The goblins began to discuss what was left for them. Just cut up these boars for dinner, and they would be completely free. But while they were discussing this, an unknown archer had already pulled the bowstring and was aiming straight at these goblins. Finally, he let go of the rubber band, and the arrow flew out of the bow. Our hero noticed that something was wrong and jumped on his friend to save her from the shot. After that, they both looked up and noticed that their friends began to be shot with arrows. For our hero, this was not surprising because this was the reality of the goblins. So he immediately took his girlfriend by the hand and said that they needed to run away from here as quickly as possible, until the archer began to approach to hit them. And behind the archer, there were still two heroes, who were happy that they could finally raise the level because of these goblins. No matter how sad it is, goblins are creatures that in this world have always been prey for hunters for profit. Meanwhile, our hero ran away with his friend, and the girl said that they should not abandon the others, to which our hero answered closed that these guys could not be saved. After that, he took out a harpoon and said that he would come up with something. He tried to shoot it, but the invention was broken initially, and nothing worked out for him. Our hero immediately began to be indignant because he had wasted 3 whole weeks on this thing and it doesn't work, and his girlfriend said that now is not the time to test his inventions. They need to get away from here as quickly as possible in order to stay alive. Meanwhile, one of the hunters caught up with them, who happily told his friends that he had found 2 more goblins, and their ears should be enough for them for the quest. Our heroes continued to run away, and in the meantime the girl said that her ears were very valuable and the cutest in her village, so it was better for them to take the ears from her friend. They continued to run deeper into the forest, and our hero suddenly noticed that a huge mushroom had appeared on their way. He immediately jumped up to jump on this cloud mushroom, while his girlfriend did not understand what he was doing. But as soon as our hero jumped on this mushroom, it springs upward with enormous force. The fog rose around, and the knife hunters could not understand what this goblin had just done, and where they got such smart relatives from. For a couple of seconds, the bounty hunters thought with displeasure that they had missed 2 whole goblins. His friend asked him to stop staring into space and said that these goblins had already left, and they just needed to come to terms with it. But the knife hunter opened his system and stated that he only needed 2 ears. The girl looked at this guy and asked why he was moving his hand through the air, because there was nothing there. After that, she said that this bounty hunter was very strange and suggested finally leaving here. Meanwhile, the goblins successfully reached their village, and our hero's friend said that she thought that they were already Kurdic, to which the guy replied that the girl always thinks so, but she immediately objected that they are always on the verge of this. As soon as they got inside, our hero immediately thought about the fact that he had always wondered why the bounty hunters always hunt them, because they don't even eat goblins, and just take their ears and things. Holding his head, the hero thought again, why are these guys constantly trying to take their ears? And it's also unclear why they are trying to take the goblins' things, because the bounty hunters always have them much better. Having relaxed a little, they approached the main square and, looking around in surprise, asked each other why everyone had suddenly gathered here. After that, they began to push to get further away because they could not see anything because of the other huge goblins. At the center of this meeting, the elder spoke, who said that this was already the 7th attack by the bounty hunters in a week, and it was obvious that they began to attack them more often. One of the goblins took our hero's friend by the shoulder and said that he was very sorry about her brothers, whose name was Gable. The girl looked at him in surprise and asked what he was talking about, to which the man replied that it seemed like her brother died today. The girl thought a little and began to remember how many brothers she had and how many had already died, thinking that they clearly could not remember the one who died today. And our hero, meanwhile, was thinking that this always happens when you have several hundred brothers and sisters and you no longer know who is alive and who is not. One of the old goblins said that now, in his opinion, everyone understands that they must do something about these vile prophet hunters. Our hero heard these words and immediately became very inspired thinking about what strategy they would follow, because in his opinion, it would be very logical to set a trap or disguise themselves. But you are getting old. But in the meantime, he said that in order to fight with the hunters for profit, they are ready to send a lot more goblins on the hunt in order to crush these hunters in numbers. Everyone immediately began to rejoice. Only one of our heroes was weaving such an excellent plan. He was indignant for this. Suddenly, our hero asked everyone to be silent and said that sending more goblins would lead to greater losses and they should come up with a more tactical plan. But the elder did not take his words seriously and jokingly asked our hero what plan he has. Does he really want to create again another idle meadow that will magically rid them of the enemy? Other goblins immediately began to approach our hero who were interested in his words and asked, "What is his plan?" To which Nog replied that at least now he thinks that they should change the way they hunt in order to avoid the live hunters they send to. There are more goblins, and then, in his opinion, they should find out why the bounty hunters are hunting them. The elder of this village suffered for a couple of seconds, and after that he laughed very hard, saying that this was the stupidest idea he had ever heard in his entire life. Our hero looked down at the floor, and the elder said that goblins should never try to understand the hunters, and because no one cares what is in the heads of these barbarians, he also added that the goblins are obliged to destroy these people before they do it to them. The elder looked at our hero and told him to think a little about the fact that only with true power can they force these creatures to escape from the earth, and this power is the most important for the goblins. Immediately after this meeting, our hero headed to his home and began to throw his things around with the thought that the elder wants to send more goblins to death and also called him stupid today. Suddenly, his girlfriend came into his house and wanted to say something, but he immediately interrupted her and said that they could try to do something themselves. The girl was surprised and asked what he was talking about, and the guy went to his chest and then opened it, and a golden glow appeared from it. Our hero was silent for a while and said that they could catch the bounty hunter themselves. After that, they both looked with a smile at what was inside this chest, and our hero said that they could find out why bounty hunters hate goblins. The next day, our hero began to persistently tinker with something. While a bunch of goblins went hunting, our hero thought that it was not only the elder, but absolutely all the goblins, because in this village, everyone thinks that he is the real fool for being engaged in his inventions. Finally, after a couple of hours, he raised his hand up and declared that he had finally finished his new invention. His friend stood nearby and was very happy for our hero. After that, he looked into her eyes and asked if she was ready to go on a trip, to which the girl immediately nodded and stated that she was completely ready. After that, they headed towards the exit from the village with the thoughts that a detachment of hunters had just left, and this was their chance to catch someone alive, because in this world there are a lot of creatures, and only in this forest there are more of them than he can count, and among them there are goblins, and they are considered the weakest. But what they lack in strength, they have always made up for in numbers. However, in fact, in this world, all the creatures of the forest suffer from only one thing, from people, because for as long as our hero could remember, people raided their forest and killed everything they saw, especially goblins, as if they had something valuable. These same heroes actually call themselves hunters for profit, but in reality they are not like either heroes or hunters. And our hero was now wondering how long this senseless killing of each other will continue, cannot be eternal. Suddenly, our hero came to reality because of the scream of his girlfriend, who asked why he fell asleep, to which he replied that he was just a little tired while he was making things. The girl looked at our hero and asked why they were here, saying that now everyone was fighting with the bounty hunters in the center, and they would be many times more likely to catch someone if they were closer to the battle coefficient. Nog immediately replied that in this case they would have an even greater chance of dying just like yesterday, and his girlfriend immediately changed her mind and said that she really didn't want that. Nog continued to say that the strongest hunters now were probably fighting in the center of the forest. But if he were a weak hunter, he would separate from the others and inspect the area, away from the battle for lonely wandering monsters. Finally, our hero finished making something and said that they are now exactly where one can meet such a hunter. And his friend noticed that she could not even think about it. The girl with purple hair smiled and said that Nog was really great, and he thanked her and said that she didn't even have to doubt it. After that, he extended his hand forward and told her that now they would set up 3 traps. He said that the first is called a network installation, The second is a human trap, and the third is a heavenly thief. Immediately after that, his girlfriend said that this is very cool, but immediately asked why they have such lame names. To which our hero replied that it is only because they reflect what they do, and to be honest, he just couldn't come up with a name for them for a long time, and settled on the most obvious. After some time, our goblins noticed that a man was approaching them. They immediately jumped into the bushes, and the man looked back and asked, "Is there really someone here?" No one answered him, and he confidently began to walk forward, stumbling upon a trap. But it did not work, and he simply moved on peacefully. As soon as our heroes crawled out of the bushes, they asked each other in surprise, "Why did the trap not work?" Our hero stood in the center of the trap and thought, saying that he was sure that he did everything right. And after a couple of seconds, the net immediately began to fall on him. Our hero's friend immediately began to laugh and say that it seemed like his trap was really working, and this was not idle chatter. And in the meantime, our hero asked her to shut up and help him get out. After that, they headed to the second point with a smile, saying that it's okay that the first trap didn't work, because the next one will work 100% because it can't give a cutoff. It was a gem in the center, a pile of leaves underneath which was a hole. But the hero, looking at the stone, decided that it was just a trinket, and decided to pass by without touching this stone. His girlfriend immediately started laughing again and saying that our hero was completely worthless. They came out of the bushes, and our hero began to ask in surprise, why don't people need such rare minerals, because it's obvious that such a thing can be sold at a high price? To which his friend replied that goblins don't even need this mineral, let alone people. After that, she took out a goblin doll and said that they could put this instead of that mineral, and then perhaps there would be more chances. Our hero immediately began to get angry and say that no one needed such a doll, and said that he did not understand where the girl got it from. And Goblin began to say that she made this doll herself and it looks just great, and hunters for profit always take their things. So this is the perfect bait. They put the doll and waited for several hours. Unexpectedly, they noticed after a few hours in ambush that the hero had returned and immediately approached this doll. And with the thoughts that this was goblin fabric and it would be ideal for his daily quest, and our hero. For a while he couldn't believe his eyes, and his girlfriend just laughed. Gubble calmed down a little and took an axe, and then went to the threads that were holding the trap and cut them into two parts. Immediately after this, the hero realized that he had fallen into a trap and looked up, screaming in fear that he was about to die. And meanwhile, the rope was slowly enveloping his body. After this, our hero once again pulled another rope, and the bounty hunter immediately found himself hanging upside down. The hero lost consciousness with the thoughts that he had just been defeated by two pathetic goblins. And this is just a real shame. After a couple of minutes, he came to his senses and saw two green men in front of him who greeted him. The hunter tried to answer something, but he had a gag in his mouth and he could not say anything. But inside he was thinking that everything should not have happened like this. Nog, meanwhile, with a smile, he said that this hero need not worry about anything. After all, if he cooperates with the goblins, they will let him go. And the bounty hunter himself still could not believe that he was caught by some goblins. Nog and Gubble, meanwhile, did not let up, and said that first they had a couple of basic questions that this bounty hunter would be required to answer. A couple of minutes later, our hero approached this hunter and asked, "Why do they hate goblins so much?" The hunter of the living wanted to answer something, but he didn't have time because our hero came even closer and declared that the bounty hunters hunt goblins all day long to take their teeth or ears. Our hero's friend asked to remind this hunter that they also take the goblins' things. Nog looked at his girlfriend and said that he already knew about all this. After that, he turned his gaze to the bounty hunter and asked this guy, "Why do hunters hunt goblins? Can't they all live in peace?" The bounty hunter looked away and said that anyway, all goblins are stupid, so they still won't be able to understand anything. And our hero said that if he doesn't want to answer, then it's pointless to leave this hero alive. The man looked at the goblin and asked him if he thought that his threats would frighten a real hunter for profit. Gubble, meanwhile, took her friend's words seriously and cut the rope so that the bounty hunter would fall. The hunter and our hero looked in surprise at this mad girl and shouted that she was wrong. There were thorns below, and it was obvious that the hunter should already be dead. So our hero immediately looked at his friend and asked why she cut the rope, to which the girl replied that he himself said that it was time for him to die and even gave a signal with his hand. The guy immediately started screaming and saying that he just wanted to scare this hunter, not kill him, and he also said that they weren't setting up any hand signals. The girl realized with surprise that it was happening. They had just killed a hunter just like that. But our hero looked at his friend and said that, in fact, only she killed this hero. The girl looked down at the bloody body of this hero and said that Nog should go down there to pick him up. He immediately began to ask her does she really want him to go down there for this guy, to which the girl crossed her arms and said that it would be right. A couple of minutes later, our hero was already descending to this place, with thoughts that he hated these people. And he also reminded him every couple of seconds so that his girlfriend did not throw the rope. Suddenly, he looked down and saw that there was blue energy there, which was heading towards our hero with a cheerful smile. The goblin got scared and immediately started poking him with his foot, saying that this damn ghost should get out of here as soon as possible. But unexpectedly, the ghost only accelerated and entered Nog's chest at full speed. After that, our hero immediately began to crawl out of the hole and complained to his friend that some kind of phantom had penetrated him. The girl did not understand what he was talking about because she did not see anything and said that he did not even reach the hero's body. Meanwhile, the goblin declared that some strange ghost came out of the bounty hunter and entered it. But unexpectedly, our goblin's eyes shone with a blue light, and a system appeared before his eyes, which notified our goblin, saying that she was very glad that a new player had appeared. The system immediately notified our goblin that he had unlocked a new skill called First Level Acceleration, and its cost was 50 mana. A system immediately appeared near our hero and said that the goblin had just unlocked a new skill after that. She asked the goblin if he was accepting a new skill. Nog was seriously scared and asked his friend if she saw this ghost. The system smiled and said that its carrier is the only one who is able to see and hear it, and our hero's friend, meanwhile, said that he would simply come because of the stress he had experienced. Nog fell silent and thought about the fact that he needs to calm down first. After all, if a sign is haunting him, it means he deserved it. After all, the death of this hunter is now in his hands. After that, he raised his hands and could not understand why the phantom chose him and not his girlfriend who killed the hunter. Suddenly, the system opened a window in front of our hero and he looked at it in surprise, asking, "What is it?" There were two options, the first to accept and the second to refuse, and our hero did not understand how to use it and tried to touch this system, but his hand went right through. After that, he looked at his friend and shouted and asked him if she really couldn't see anything, to which the girl replied that her friend most likely just hit his head. The rest of the heroes heard this argument and decided to move towards the cries of these goblins to finish them off. Gubble immediately began to worry and said that the bounty hunters would soon come for them and they needed to get out of here as soon as possible. Nog immediately took the girl by the hand and said that they could run away from here and stay alive. And she didn't need to be afraid. They began to run away, but right in front of them, an arrow hit a tree. They continued to run away, and at some point our hero suggested that his friends split up to make it easier to escape, to which the girl agreed and said that they would meet in the village. One person continued to run after our hero, who said that today the dirty goblin would die. But our hero replied that he was not a dirty 5-star bathe every day. He also did not understand why the alert in front of his face did not disappear. And the system explained to this guy that he must first choose to accept or refuse. The guy didn't understand what she was talking about and said that he was going to die. Suddenly, he remembered that this notification said something about acceleration, and decided that if he accepted it, it would help him escape. As he walked, the man told the system to approve this skill and activate the acceleration. The magician who was trying to catch up with this goblin, meanwhile, held his book in his hands and said that now the goblin will definitely die because they are looking to dodge this very strong, type of witchcraft. The magician missed and hit a tree that began to fall, and our hero realized that if the tree fell, it would block his path and he would definitely die. Our hero closed his eyes with the thought that he must move faster because he wants to find out why the hunters hate goblins for the fifth. And for this, he should not die here. With every step, he accelerated and thought that he must bring peace as a goblin and become as great as the goblin named Thunder. Unexpectedly, he finally understood how to use this skill and used the acceleration skill, jumping over this tree in an instant. The hunter who was running after this goblin couldn't believe his eyes because he had never seen a goblin use someone's skills before in his life. After that, Mac used his most powerful spell and unleashed a whole flurry of fiery attacks on this goblin, which our hero easily dodged with the help of acceleration. And finally, in order to completely escape from this hunter, when he used maximum acceleration and in an instant found himself in another part of the forest, he looked down in surprise and asked his ghost, "Did he really teleport?" The system smiled and said that in fact everything was not like that, and it only helped its owner activate acceleration to temporarily increase his speed. After these words, our goblin heard the screams of these hunters again and looked at his system, saying that she would be obliged to explain everything to him, and she definitely could not avoid interrogation. That a couple of minutes later, our hero ran to his village where he saw that many goblins were very badly wounded and dripping with blood. He looked at all this with an emotionless expression on his face. And inside, he decided that this couldn't go on any longer. He went up to one of his brothers and asked if he had seen his girlfriend. The man looked down at this little goblin and said that he had not yet seen his friend, but was glad that at least Nog was alive. As soon as he heard that his girlfriend did not return to the village, he immediately began to run away from the village to find her, because he could not believe that she had died. He used his acceleration to quickly run out of the village, and the other goblins were surprised at how fast he had become. Suddenly, a system appeared in front of our hero that said that if he wants to find his girlfriend, he can use the analysis skill. Our hero got scared and asked her not to scare her like that anymore, and then asked if the system could read his thoughts, to which the system replied that she hears absolutely all his thoughts. After that, the goblin asked his system to stop chasing him, to which the system replied that it could not abandon its owner because its task was to help him. And by the way, she noticed that analysis is a standard skill that all beginners have, and with the help of it, he will be able to find his girlfriend. Inside, our hero began to think about the word skill closed, but immediately turned around and said that this time he would trust his system. Immediately after this, the system realized that the goblin did not know how to use skills and helped him use the analysis skill, after which he saw his entire friendly territory and began scanning absolutely every goblin. After a couple of minutes, he finally noticed Red A, and it was his friend whom he had been looking for so long. He started running to meet her and shouting her name, and the girl turned around and was surprised that the guy survived. After that, she also began to run towards him, and already wanted to hug him with tears in her eyes. The guy was not ready for her to jump on him so hard and fell. And the girl said that she thought that these hunters had caught him and they would never be able to see each other again. The goblin girl began to hug our hero with the words that he should swear to her that they would never part again. After our hero stood up, he hugged his girlfriend and said that he agreed, and also did not want to part with her anymore. And the system was pleased because it was able to help its player. That same evening, they went to our hero's house, where he threatened his system with a knife, and said that she was now obliged to tell him everything she knew, otherwise he would gut her. His girlfriend, meanwhile, sat and looked at how her friend just beats the air with a knife and didn't understand what he was doing. She asked him what he was doing, and the man replied that he had already told her, and she simply did not see it. But in fact, the ghost of the heroes whom they killed was hunting for him and was not far behind him. But the goblin also said that this ghost helped him avoid a collision with one of the hunters and saved his life. I couldn't believe my eyes at all this, but inside I was thinking that this guy most likely snorted the spores of sweet mushrooms and is now delirious like a drug addict. And meanwhile, our goblin continued to try to kill the system and force it to tell everything, but the system was just, I'm happy to tell him everything and answer any question regarding the system. After these words, our goblin tried to pierce the system right through, but the system declared that it was pointless to threaten it because it could not die. And meanwhile, our hero's friend was thinking that it was better for her to leave here and not look at this whole madhouse. After some time, the guy finally figured out how to use the system and its windows and said that it turns out that he is a user of the system and his system's name is Pip. The system immediately told our hero that this is exactly how everything is, and the guy said that he didn't think that everything would be so simple. But the system answered all his questions. After that, he asked to show his level in the system, and was surprised because the system said that he was at the entry level in the system. And he also saw all his characteristics, and also he realized that if he gained enough experience, he would raise his level and be able to upgrade his characteristics and skills. After that, he thought that everything seemed too good to be true, so he stopped and asked the system, why did he only have 2 power points? The system did not understand the question, and the guy said that his girlfriend was 6 times more powerful, to which the system replied that Goblin was simply much stronger than him. After that, our hero, in a sad state, lay down next to his girlfriend and said that the system actually went out because of the hunter, and it turns out he can inherit his characteristics, to which the system replied that it doesn't work like that, and it's time for the electrical system to reset when it goes over to a new player, after which the goblin said that it turns out that he is really so weak that he cannot do anything. After that, he looked down and wondered how it happened that the hunter got this system and why it even exists and who created it. He began to think that all people could have it, and that's why the bounty hunters are so strong. After that, he looked forward with confidence and decided that he definitely needed to find out the answers to all these questions, because the system had already proven that it was actually very powerful and could make him stronger. And with the help of it, he could change the whole world and find out why bounty hunters kill goblins. And what kind of system is this really? He was silent for a bit. Our goblin got out of bed and said that he had just a crazy idea and they could become hunters for profit with it, he said, losing his nose. On the same day, they began to change into other things so that no one would recognize them in the city. And Gubble asked his friend in surprise if he was sure that this would suit them, to which he replied that in these masks absolutely no one would be able to recognize them. He also added that, besides everything he just said, all these things once belonged to real hunters, so they definitely won't arouse any suspicion. And the girl replied that she didn't think that they had accumulated so many things of bounty hunters. Nog smiled and said that the most important thing is that they have the best disguise, because she herself saw how ridiculous they look in other clothes. After this, the goblin girl said that in this case they need weapons because they are now hunters for profit and must always be well armed, and our hero agreed with these words. The goblin girl found huge gloves and said that she really liked them. The girl began waving these gloves and saying that she always had a good and heavy blow, and our hero looked at her in surprise and asked if she was really going to fight with them, to which the girl replied that she didn't care. After that, our hero walked away a little and began to think about what weapon would suit him, and began to remember his skills in order to somehow adjust his weapon to the characteristics. He used terrain analysis and began looking for weapons suitable for him. But every time the system told him that he did not have enough power points to use this weapon, and if he used it, his attack rate would decrease by 50%. After that, he exhaled tiredly and asked his system if he only had enough strength for a dagger, to which the system replied that it was so. After that, he looked at the dagger that was lying in gold and saw that it was an ordinary weak dagger without additional effects. He picked him up and cried from the realization that he was so weak, and his girlfriend began to laugh and say that the guy had clearly not yet grown up to use heavy weapons. And at that moment, the system told its owner that at the moment he did not have enough strength for larger weapons. Therefore, he needs to increase his level to improve his characteristics. The system also reminded its owner that he could store this dagger in his inventory. Our hero asked in surprise what inventory was, and the system explained that he just needed to touch the item he needed and mentally think that it would be in a certain bag. After that, Goblin decided to try this skill and thought that the dagger was moving into his bag, and it immediately disappeared from his hand. After that, the goblin began to jerk his hand in fear and said that his only dagger that he could use had just disappeared, and the system said with a smile that now the dagger was in his inventory, and to view his inventory he just needed to think about it mentally. The goblin immediately did so, and was surprised at how truly useful the system is, because it simplifies everything so much. Gubble looked at her happy friend who, as usual, was communicating with the air, as if he was in a fight club, and asked why he was so excited there. After another couple of hours, they finally changed completely, and taking everything they needed, they headed into the city. Our hero's friend asked him why he still jerks his hands, to which our hero replied that this is his system, and the girl simply does not see him. The girl didn't believe him and got a little angry, and said that if he doesn't want to say what he's doing, then he shouldn't. But she asked him not to come up with all sorts of stories about the ghosts of hunters who are haunting him. And the guy asked in surprise whether she still doesn't believe him. Immediately after this, they heard someone's voices and immediately began to run towards them, because they thought that they were bounty hunters. As soon as they got to the right place, they noticed that these hunters clearly had problems with the monsters, and they were barely fighting back, and might even lose. Our hero used his analysis and realized that these hunters decided to collect honeyberries, but they were attacked by monsters who protect this place, and this is all because the hunters do not know how to properly collect these berries, so they did not fall into the trap. He continued to think inside that slugs simply adore these berries and will kill anyone who tries to decorate them. At some point, one of the hunters threw his shield and began to run away from the battlefield with the thought that he could no longer tolerate this. The rest of the participants immediately began to say that he should come back because he is their tank, and they really need him. But there was no way to get through to him anymore. And one of the girls said that they couldn't escape from here because they were under the close attention of so many slugs, and they had just been left to die. Meanwhile, our goblin looked at all this in surprise and did not understand how this guy just up and abandoned his friends. The goblin girl looked at her friend and said that they could actually move out. Immediately after this, our heroes jumped out of the bushes waving their weapons and asked everyone to remain calm because they would help them. Our heroes got into a fight with the slugs, and our hero's friend said that there were too many of them, which our main goblin agreed with, saying that they should figure out how to deal with them as quickly as possible. He also added that he hates fighting slugs because they always recover, and in order to kill them you need to destroy their core. And his girlfriend said that this is just a real abomination. Suddenly, several more slugs approached them, as well as another large group, and the girl said that they had more problems, to which our hero replied that as long as they were near these honeyberries, the slugs would not stop staying. But he doubted that with this wounded girl they will be able to escape from this crowd. They looked at the other hunters and saw that the healer was treating one of them, saying that the girls had suffered greatly, but they would definitely be able to cure her. Our heroes looked at them and asked if everything was okay, to which the healer replied that they were fine, and she never thought that she would meet two gnomes in this area. The goblins looked at each other and were surprised that these guys thought they were gnomes. But then they said that everything was right and they were actually gnome hunters, and they would detain these slugs, but only for a short time because they did not have enough strength. Suddenly, our hero came up with the idea of using the analysis skill to see where their cores were and quickly destroy them. And then he used acceleration to move to their weak point, and they could not dodge. Such thinking bore fruit, and his first opponent was only defeated, and the system congratulated him on the fact that everything was working out for him and the slime was defeated. After that, our hero looked at his system and asked if she had seen this, to which the system replied that she was delighted, because using the analysis skill to identify the enemy's weak point is the right tactic, but only under the condition that your perception characteristic is greater than that of the enemy. Suddenly, a notification appeared in front of our hero saying that he had just earned 5 units and about 20 more slugs, and he would raise his level. The system simultaneously began to explain that, depending on the rank and strength of the mob, it will be awarded experience points, and to the right a certain number of experience points, it will be able to increase its level and also improve its characteristics and discover new skills that will make it even stronger. The goblin was happy about this and even wanted to thank the system. But as soon as he turned away, the slugs immediately attacked him, and the system said that he thought that they should talk about it after the battle and not during it. His girlfriend helped him get rid of these goblins, and our hero was surprised to notice that she did not even need to aim at the core of these slugs because she simply smeared them into pieces with her blows. After this, our hero received a notification that he had lost 30 life points and had only 120 left. He looked at his system and asked what would happen if his life points reached 0. The system looked at its owner and said that it's obvious that you think that he will die. And the guy immediately replied that he was surprised, because before that he thought that he would simply lose consciousness or something like that. But now he definitely doesn't feel at ease. After these words, he continued beating the slugs, and his girlfriend asked who he was constantly talking to which he replied that it was his system. The healer, meanwhile, said that she was already beginning to worry about the gnomes because he was constantly talking to himself. The situation actually did not bode well because our heroes were surrounded by a crowd of these slugs. The night girl said that they would definitely die and asked her healer to push, to which the healer replied that she was trying. It's just that the knight's girl had a lot of fractures, and the knight, meanwhile, replied that at this rate they would soon have no one to save. She looked at her friend and told her to leave her to die, and went and helped these gnomes. Hiller immediately closed her eyes and said that she would never leave her partner because she promised God that she would become a hunter and heal her assistant, and they would all get out of here together. Meanwhile, the new one continued to fight and our main character tried to figure out how to get everyone out of this mess because things are too bad and there are too many slugs and they keep coming and coming to taste the honeyberries. Suddenly, the atmosphere became tense and a column of fire appeared around them, which killed all the slugs in one fell swoop. After that, the fire tornado subsided, and a man came out of it saying that a bird sang to him that the guys needed help. It was the hunter Tyros, who stood proudly with his fiery blade and said that he was very glad that he was able to make it on time. After that, the fire hunter headed towards the rest of the slugs and thanked the 2 gnomes for saving his partners, and he also said that he was now in debt to these gnomes. Meanwhile, the tank approached his partners and said that he was very sorry that he abandoned them, and he had already regretted it 100 times, and that's why he brought the fiery hunter here. Healer looked at him and said that if it weren't for these gnomes, by the time they arrived, they would all have been dead long ago. Meanwhile, the fiery hunter said that during the hunt, there in life it is necessary to attract the enemy to oneself. So their partners have every right not to trust him because he did not justify their trust. And in the meantime, she tried to drink the tank and said that he had betrayed them. He and the hunter, meanwhile, said with a smile that they were very lucky that these 2 dwarves came to their rescue. So he extended his hand to them and said that he was very glad to meet them. Our goblin looked at this in surprise and did not understand what was happening because he had never in his life seen a person want to send a hand to a goblin. But they are from here. His friend appeared who said that her name was Goblin and her partner was Nog. The girl immediately shook the fiery hunter's hand and remembered his words that he had just said that he was indebted to them, so this meant that he would reward them. Our hero looked at his friend and asked her not to be so rude to the first person she met. But the fire hunter laughed and said that he was very pleased with such words, and he had never seen such assertive hunters. After that, to the surprise of the goblins, the man said that they are now heading to their guild and it is not far from here, which means that they will go through the human village. And also the man said that he believes that if the dwarves do not mind, then they can go with them and they will share the reward and reward them for their efforts. The goblins smiled and said that they completely agreed to this plan of action and were immediately ready to go to this guild. After that, they all headed to this shell, and the hunters along the way complained that they were dying of hunger. The fire hunter suddenly stopped and asked everyone not to worry because they were almost there. Meanwhile, our hero remembered that this guy had just killed all the slugs with one blow, and he probably had a very special sword, so our goblin decided to use his analysis skill to find out what characteristics his sword has. But the system immediately notified him that the analysis failed because our hero's level of perception was too low. The system immediately appeared and reminded its owner that his perception skill was now too low, and he needed to put more points into it to pump up this skill. Our hero asked. Really, he would need to spend points from leveling up on these skills, and the system said that everything doesn't work quite like that, and some skills are pumped up on their own if you use them often. After which the goblin asked why the system is so confusing. After all, he doesn't have anything anymore, understand? But immediately after this, the goblin calmed down and realized that this guy was simply too strong. Since he could not look at the characteristics of even his ball, our hero wondered if he would ever be able to reach such a level, because now he is still on the first. After another couple of hours, our heroes finally reached the city. The goblins immediately began to examine the city and say that it was simply incredibly huge and advanced, so much so that there were even clothing stores and weapons shops. The fire hunter remembered the gnomes and said that he perfectly understands that now their eyes are running wild. But he immediately added that they should not worry, because the guilds will feed them well. Nog, meanwhile, held his girlfriend's hand, and while walking through the city, he reflected on the fact that only a few moments of being in human civilization were enough for him to understand how different they are. Meanwhile, the heroes looked at our gnomes and said that in gratitude for what they saved, they would definitely find something to give them, because that would be fair. Our heroes looked at all this and smiled, thinking that they were very pleased. But inside, the goblins thought that these bounty hunters were not so bad. Then they began to pass by cages with animals, and the goblin stopped and asked the fire hunter why these animals are in cages. To which he replied that for some living rare animals they pay more than for dead ones, and they are sent to the so-called infinity prison, supposedly to measure them before selling it to the animal tamers, the fiery hunter said. But in the end he added that at least that's what he heard. After some more time they finally returned, and the goblin could not believe his eyes. As soon as they entered, one of the local hunters immediately raised a glass to the fire hunter. The man with a smile stated that he believed that he thought that this guy would not come. And the fiery hunter smiled and said that he was sorry for being so late. That's how it turned out. So on today's hunt they made 2 new friends. After that, the fire hunter smiled and pointed at our goblins, saying that their names were Goblin and Nog, and told the head of the guild that these 2 saved their knight and healer from death. The head of the guild looked at these guys and said, "Is this really so?" And our goblins immediately said that it was so. And the fire hunter said that he promised these 2 a reward for today's heroism. And the head of the guild laughed and said that he was very glad to hear that the girls remained safe. Unexpectedly, our hero's friend looked into one of the corners and saw that there were a lot of people standing there. She thought a little and asked why they were all crowded there, and the head of the guild replied that today, you are being tested as hunters. He began to explain that a novice bounty hunter can take a test in any of the guild halls, and after passing it, he will receive the appropriate wounds and will be able to complete quests from the quest board. The others immediately began to tell our heroes that the guild always accepts hunters who have passed the tests. Hearing this, our hero realized that this was a great opportunity to become an official bounty hunter. The head of the guild, meanwhile, stood up and said that he would now go for gold for the gnomes, for their heroism. But our hero looked at the head of the guild and asked to choose another reward. Everyone who heard this was immediately embarrassed because they didn't expect this guy to be so arrogant. But their doubts immediately disappeared because these dwarves asked to be allowed to take part in the test for hunters. The head of the guild laughed when he heard this and said that if they want to become hunters, then he cannot refuse them. The head of the guild smiled and looked at these 2 gnomes, saying that as a reward for saving their girls, the fire hunter will conduct a special test for them, and it will be much faster than usual, and there will be less paperwork. After this, the head of the guild smiled and said that the test would be that they would have to hold out for 1 minute against the strongest member of their guild, who was called the fire hunter. The fire hunter looked at Nog and Gabble, saying that if any of them could hold out for a minute, then they would accept them into the Red Ravens Guild. After that, our hero received a notification that a new 1-minute test was available to him, and as a reward, he would be able to receive as many as 100 experience points and join the guild. Nog thought about it and realized that if he passed this test, he would find out what would happen when the level increased, so he immediately smiled and said that he agreed to this test. His girlfriend also raised her hands up and said that they would gladly accept this test to join the guild. The fire hunter immediately changed, and an ominous aura began to emanate from him. He looked at our heroes and said that in this case it was time for them to start. The first was our hero's friend, and she and the fiery hunter entered the arena. The girl began to warm up and say, "Does she really need to hold out for just 1 minute? All in her opinion, it should be very easy." Meanwhile, the guild leader raised his hand up and declared that the minute test begins right now between the fire hunter and Goblin. As soon as the test began, the girl immediately jumped up and began running at full speed towards the fiery hunter. As soon as he saw this, he looked in surprise because he did not expect her to be so fast. And the people in the crowd were surprised at what they saw because before that, they had never known that gnomes could move like that. Nog, meanwhile, used his analysis skill and noticed that Goblin had become stronger because her power level had increased from 12 to 15. Meanwhile, the girl began to suppress the fire hunter, and he even had to retreat for a while. Everyone looked in surprise at how the brave dwarf girl fought with the fiery hunter. But after a couple of seconds, the fire hunter, with a smile, said that the girl knew how to withstand a blow while he carried her, unconscious. Immediately after this, the head of the guild announced that a new 1-minute test of the fire hunter and Nog was beginning. Our hero immediately took a fighting stance and thought that this guy only needed 10 seconds to defeat his girlfriend, so he must defeat him. Immediately after that, he charged and used his acceleration skill. And as soon as the head of the guild announced that the test was beginning, our hero suddenly found himself right in the face of this fiery hunter. He was able to cut him, but the fire hunter dodged in the last seconds. Immediately after this, Nog ran away at great speed with the thought that this was definitely not enough for victory, and he needed to become even faster. The spectators, meanwhile, were surprised at how fast this dwarf is, because they can hardly see his movements, so they were surprised at how aggressive he was, and noticed that he was not just trying to pass this test, he was trying to defeat the fire hunter. Meanwhile, several seconds had already passed and Nog ran a little away from his opponent with thoughts about how he believed that he could not hit him. And most likely, this guy was already able to adapt to his speed. Unexpectedly, the fire hunter was able to catch the goblin and hit him face first with all his strength on the ground, saying that he must show what other tricks he had up his sleeve. Goblin covered her face because she didn't want to watch her friend get knocked down, and the rest of the spectators in the stands looked on excitedly, while the goblin himself thought that he literally had nothing left to do against his opponent, and this was most likely his limit. However, in his head, he suddenly heard the voice of the system, which announced that by using the acceleration skill the required number of times, he was finally able to upgrade it to the second level. As soon as he got this feeling from the system, he began to get up and say that he promised his girlfriend that they would become hunters. He rose to his feet, saying that this was his only chance to achieve his goal, and in the meantime began to charge the second-level acceleration skill. The system explained to our hero that the acceleration skill will now accelerate him exactly 200%, and our hero with a smile said that if he had reached his limit, he would simply overcome it. The fire hunter looked at all this with the thought that this guy definitely still had a few trump cards left. But his thoughts were suddenly interrupted by Nog, who, with new speed, attacked the fiery hunter, taking him by surprise. The fire hunter was barely able to dodge and could not believe his eyes, because this meant that before this, the dwarf had not fought at full strength. Now finally, the confrontation became more or less equal. The hero continued to attack the hunter at great speed, but he still could not break through this guy's defense. Our hero only had a little mana left, and this would be enough for only one acceleration. So he gathered his thoughts, and at full speed, jumped off the wall towards the fiery hunter. Meanwhile, the hunter himself smiled and looked at this enormous speed and said that the couple was taking this fight more seriously. And right after that, the train ended because the fire hunter was able to knock out this guy with one serious blow, after which he smiled and said that, of course, it was a good fight. But alas, no one can defeat him. However, to everyone's surprise, Nog stood up and said that he was still able to continue the fight, so they should continue. Goblin looked at all this and immediately began to run to our hero with the words that he does not need to make such sacrifices. Meanwhile, the fire hunter was surprised, and a smile immediately appeared on his face. He expressed delight due to the fact that Nog was still conscious. However, The head of the guild approached this guy and grabbed his hand with the words that they should stop the battle because 1 minute and 10 seconds had already passed, which means that this guy passed the test. Gubble, meanwhile, looked her friend straight in the eyes and asked how he was able to withstand such a strong blow, to which Nog replied that the fire hunter struck with the flat side of his sword. Their conversation was interrupted by the hunter himself, who approached them and extended his hand, saying that he congratulated them. After that, he turned his gaze to our hero and stated that this dwarf fought very well, and he can confidently say that he will make an excellent bounty hunter. The system, meanwhile, notified our hero that from now on, he is a member of the Red Crows Guild and receives 100 units of experience that he needed to increase his level. Immediately after this, the fire hunter congratulated our heroes again and said that now they can get your hunter cards. Gubble sadly asked why she had a gray card but wanted a green one, and our hero asked her not to find fault with such trifles. Hearing this, the fire hunter thought and asked, "Do they really not know anything about the hunters for profit?" He immediately began to explain that after they passed the tests, they were allowed to touch the altar of their guild. And by doing so, they associated themselves with the hunter cards. The answer of the card shows the class of the hunter, and the green card means that the Nog has a rank of F, and the gray card means classless, that is, the lowest level of the hierarchy. However, the fiery hunter Tyros smiled and said that there is nothing to worry about, that they have such low ranks because a hunter can raise his class by completing tasks and earning points, and having collected the required number, they will quickly raise their class. After which he went to the board with announcements and said that on this board there are tasks assigned to the Red Crows Guild, and after completing the task they need to come to the registration desk and hand over their card, after which a certain number of points will be awarded. After this monologue, Fire Hunter looked at Gubble and said that if she wants to get a green card, then she should complete several tasks. However, he immediately said that he recommends that they recruit a group to begin with before heading out, because for safety reasons it will be better, because usually the task is performed by a group of 5 people. Nog went up to the notice board and noticed that there was a task here from a certain Quara. The task was to collect 30 goblin ears, and Gabble, meanwhile, showed the very top with a smile and said that there was a huge reward for one of the tasks. Our hero looked up and saw that there was a wanted notice for the Great Thunder Goblin, and this was the most dangerous task of this guild. Tyros noticed where they were looking and said that in his opinion, this task is too difficult for them so far, so they need to start with something easier. And he also said that he would not mind joining them in the first task purely for their peace of mind. But suddenly their conversation was interrupted, and a healer burst in and said that she carefully watched the fights of these guys during the fight with the fire hunter, and she can say with confidence that they are not real gnomes. Nog looked at the girl in surprise and asked what she meant. Another hunter immediately came up, hugged the healer, and said that she said that gnomes are usually very well prepared. But these guys don't even have any potions and they look like real noobs, and this is a disgrace to their guild. Nog and Gubble breathed a sigh of relief because they realized that they had not been figured out and had something completely different in mind. Hilaire, meanwhile, looked at them with a smile and said that in gratitude for their posts, she gives them several episodes. The goblins immediately took all these jars and began to examine them in surprise. And the girl said that this was not enough, but this was the only way she could thank her for saving them. Nog, meanwhile, learned for the first time in his life that hunters drink some kind of potion, after which he used his analysis to find out that this is an ordinary potion that restores 5 units of health per second and can restore a maximum of 20 units of health. Looking at it, he smiled and thought that it could help a lot in battle. However, he was surprised that his recipe consists of herbs and parts of monsters. The girl knight looked at our heroes and said that she took out 2 leather bags and guild storage for them, so that they could put their products in them. Our hero immediately received a notification that he had received a leather bag that could hold up to 30 pounds. Gubble said with a smile that she really liked these gifts, and our hero said that it was simply incredibly convenient. The fire hunter looked at the gnomes and said, "Do you think that the girl who gave them these potions is an alchemist and she made them herself? So they should use them wisely because some very good trees can cost a fortune." The dwarves immediately began to bow to this girl and say that they were incredibly grateful, and the healer smiled and said that they shouldn't get caught like that. After that, the fire hunter looked at his friends and said that he was going to help Nog and Gubble with their first task, and to form a team they needed 2 more people, so he called them to join. The girls, hearing this, were immediately happy and said that they would join without questions. However, the healer looked at her friend and said that she had not yet fully recovered from that massacre. The girl tensed a little and said that she was fine, and she also said that she was obliged to show these two dwarves what she was made of. The fiery hunter smiled and said that since they already have a ready-made group, they can decide on the first task. After that, Nog went to the notice board and pointed at what interested him. It was a hunt for gray wolves. They need to kill 30 wolves in the nearest forests, bring their claws as proof, and the reward will be 10 gold. The fire hunter looked at the dwarves and asked why he chose this task, after which our hero thought about the fact that his skill called analysis showed him that an ordinary potion could be made from the fangs of gray wolves. But in fact, he said that it just seemed to him that this task was simple and ideal for starting, and he had no other reasons. However, the alchemist looked at him and realized that this was clearly not without reason, but she did not say anything because she did not have physical evidence. As soon as they were fully assembled and equipped with all their belongings, they moved into the nearest forests to deal with 30 gray wolves. While they were walking, our hero mentally turned to his system and said that after completing a 1-minute task, he increased his level and did not understand what he now needed to do. And the system said that for each level he would receive 3 stat points and only he would decide where to go invest these points. But he needs to take into account that as soon as he invests a point in any characteristic and confirms it, it will no longer be possible to return it. Hearing this information, Nog held his head in his hands, trying to say that it was too difficult. But the system said that he need not worry, because increasing the level is not the only way to improve his characteristics. And some characteristics can be improved naturally if, of course, he tries hard. The system began to say that he could simply start leveling up. And naturally, this would be much more difficult than simply using stat points. And in addition, the higher the stats you show, the more difficult it will be to raise him naturally. However, after these words, the system laughed and said that its owner's strength was so low that she was sure that he could quickly raise his level naturally. And the goblin, meanwhile, said that he was beginning to develop a certain relationship with this system. While he was thinking about this and communicating in his head with his system, a huge man suddenly appeared in front of them, and the fire hunter immediately recognized his friend. The man also greeted his friend and said that this time he had dealt too quickly, so he was still considered the best goblin hunter. Immediately, 2 more people approached and began to say that Goliath was the best goblin hunter, and they were just incredibly stupid creatures who fell into his trap. Hearing when the man laughed and said that it didn't matter that the trap was stupid, because it could still kill goblins. Listening to all this, our hero could not stand it, and turned around and began to run away. The fiery hunter asked Goblin what happened to her friend, to which she replied that she herself did not understand, and would better go and check how he was feeling there. Nog, meanwhile, was standing behind one of the corners, vomiting from nerves. There were tears in his eyes, and in his thoughts there were words that he had just begun to think that the bounty hunters were not so bad. But then this thug appeared, who is famous for killing weak goblins. Coming to his senses, he put on his mask and said that he was here for only one reason. He had to find out why these bastards were hunting goblins. Meanwhile, our hero had already been found, and they asked if everything was okay because he ran away very abruptly. The goblin smiled and said that he was fine and just felt very bad for a second, and it was probably because he ate something wrong. He didn't look like a hunter, thought for a bit, and said he's closing it, but he's not feeling well, so they can postpone this task. And our hero immediately began to deny and say that he was already in order and wanted to quickly complete this task with them. After all, he was already in perfect order. The fire hunter thought for a bit and said that if our hero speaks such words, then he really should be fine by now. They need to head out and complete this stupid task. A couple of hours later, they were already in the forest and were tracking down gray wolves. The fire hunter explained to our gnomes that these wolves, like slime, walk in packs, so we should not underestimate them, because if one wolf does not pose a threat, then when several of them gather, this is already serious opponents because they are quite strong and their goats are very fat. So everyone needs to be careful. But the girl with the halberd no longer listened and rushed over, saying that this was a building of the lowest class, so she could easily defeat them. Arya swung her huge blade towards these gray wolves, and just a second later, it swept past them like a hurricane, destroying everyone. But unexpectedly, the rest of the wolves appeared, who immediately jumped on her, and the girl found herself in a difficult situation. The fire hunter looked at all this and said that they should never go alone, because it is right to act as a group. Meanwhile, Arya was in a difficult situation, and the wolf almost bit her. But suddenly Nog appeared, who directly attacked the wolf and pierced his skull with his blade. After that, Goblin ran up and knocked out this wolf with one precise uppercut. Arya looked at these gnomes and said with a smile that they saved her life again. Our hero did not answer anything and just looked at his weapon with the thought that with the help of this dagger, he cannot pierce the thick skin of wolves. After having met all these powerful hunters, he realized more than ever that he does not have time. And if he wants to protect his friends and everyone else, then he needs to become even stronger and use everything he has for this. After that, he mentally turned to the system and said that he was ready to distribute the characteristic points. The system smiled and said that it had already done everything. After that, our hero took a low start position and with a few quick jerks finished off a group of wolves. Arya looked at all this in surprise and did not understand how he was able to cut through their skin so easily. Has he really become even stronger than before? After a couple more seconds of this fight, our hero smiled and washed the blood from his dagger, saying that that was all. Meanwhile, the system notified its owner that he had reached the third level, and he could again distribute stat points. Nog thought that all he needed was to simply increase his level, and then he would achieve everything he wanted. That evening, the hunters gathered to celebrate this victory and congratulate their new bounty hunters. The fire hunter smiled and raised his glass of beer, saying that today they did not complete their first task. The system, meanwhile, notified its owner that he had completed a task called Hunting Gray-Backed Wolves, and it turns out that he received experience units as well as 50 fangs of gray-backed wolves. Also today, he received the third level, so he began to distribute stat points again, but suddenly he saw that he could increase the analysis skill to the second level. He immediately took advantage of this opportunity. After that, he used analysis on the fire hunter's blade and saw its characteristics. But some data was still hidden, and he could not understand what kind of special attribute this ball had. But at least he could see some of the data, unlike last time. The fiery hunter suddenly approached our hero and said that he wanted to talk to him alone on the street. The goblin immediately came out, and the fire hunter began to talk about how this gnome is full of surprises, because no one knew that he would be able to complete this task so quickly. The fiery hunter walks through the forests into his bag, with the words that he knows that this was his first task, but he has excellent offers for the gnomes. After that, he took out from his bag a piece of paper with a task to kill the great boar. The difficulty was C-class, and the reward was as much as 5,000 gold. Meanwhile, the fire hunter said that he understands that the complexity of this task is incomparable with the one that was not just completed, but now in this city, he and the best goblin slayer are the only C-class hunters, and Legs with Gabble would be a great addition to their group. The fire hunter also added that everyone else would also go on this task, and with a smile, asked what the gnomes think about this. The goblin smiled under his mask and folded his hands, saying that his elder always said that great risk always brings great reward, so they will go on this mission together. Hearing this, the fire hunter smiled and said that in this case they should see each other on the spot. Returning home, our hero began to climb in the windows of the system, from which the system asked him what he was doing, to which he replied that he wanted to try something. After all, when he used the analysis on Laura's potion, he noticed that the system reported that he studied the recipe, and today in the forest he got the fangs of a gray-backed wolf and cheering leaves, and then he stole a bottle from the canteen. Therefore, if he gives all this to the system, then it will be able to make a potion. As soon as he sent all these items to one of the windows, the system immediately said that he could make a potion. He confirmed this, and immediately a regular potion with a potion appeared. The system immediately began to rejoice that its owner figured it out so quickly, and Nog said that he did not know alchemy at all, but made exactly the same potion as the girl who gave them the potion. A couple of hours later, our hero sat in a room that was completely littered with potions and said that he had overdone it a little. After that, he heard in the courtyard the best goblin slayer talking to his friends about how the night raid is the best time to hunt goblins, and they should go there immediately. Our hero immediately got dressed and ran out into the street, asking if they would mind if he joined their raid, because he would really like to hunt goblins with them. Goliath looked at our hero and said that he remembered him very well, saying that this was a dwarf who was then with a fiery hunter and who suddenly became ill and ran away, and that is why Goliath said that there is no place for such weaklings in his raid. But Goliath's friend scratched his head and said that this is the same dwarf who was able to hold out for a whole minute in a duel with a fiery hunter, and they say he is one of the fastest in the guild. And besides, they still need someone else for the hunt, the man said, hinting that it would be nice to take this gnome. After these words, the Goliath immediately turned around and said that they can do as they want, but if the dwarf detains them, they will leave him there to die. As soon as he said this, he began to quickly move away from all the people, saying that they need to go and kill some goblins. After some time, they were already in the forest, And the man said that you are our hero and did not lag behind, because this is an ideal place for bait. One of the men immediately took out sweets, and our hero was surprised that these guys knew that goblins adore sweets and their smell. They also adore treasures and everything connected with them. The goblin realized that with sweet smells they lure other goblins, and with shiny treasures they lure them into the open, and these hunters definitely know their job. After a short silence, the goblin walked up to what he looked like a strong man. After a short silence, Nog looked straight into this man's eyes and asked why, in this case, he hunts goblins and not rarer monsters. Goliath smiled and said that the reason is very simple. Goblins are very easy to kill and they pay decent money for their body parts in the market and, yes, and then they multiply like cockroaches and there are countless of them. After that, he began to move on to personal reasons and talk about how goblins are ugly, dirty, and stupid. And when he kills them and hears their dying scream, he enjoys it immensely. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately turned around and ordered the rest of the raid members to take their positions. Meanwhile, our hero realized that these hunters were killing goblins for pleasure and not for the sake of a sense of duty. His fists clenched from nerves, and he began to think about how he could stop these hunters. After some time, he noticed that some goblins began to approach the shiny treasures, and he thought inside that it was obvious that this was a trap, so he really hoped that they did not fall for it. But as soon as he saw the look of these goblins, who did not suspect anything at all, he immediately realized that his relatives were really stupid. After that, our hero shouted that he saw goblins, especially so that they would hear it. After this, the goblins immediately ran away, and the Goliath began to emerge from the bushes and ask our hero, "Is he really an idiot?" After that, they continued the goblin hunt, and our hero did everything in his power to slow down this hunt. After some time, the big man was happy because he was able to catch at least one goblin, and the other men began to say that hunting today was not going well. After that, the big guy approached our hero and threw a goblin in front of his feet, saying that Nog should kill him because he is new to Belgium and today, he finally has the chance to kill someone for the first time. Nog raised his dagger and was all cowardly with fear. He said something about how he was not ready for this, and meanwhile the goblin looked at our hero and said that he recognized this voice, after which he called our hero by name. Goliath looked at the so-called gnome and asked if he knew this goblin, after which our hero turned around and said that several years ago he was attacked by goblins and therefore he is very afraid of them. While he was saying this, he opened his inventory and continued to talk about how he hoped it would be difficult to overcome his fear of goblins today. Meanwhile, the system asked our hero in his head, why did he take the egg out of his inventory? And the rest of the men from this raid began to shout that this was a chance for Nog to take revenge on the goblins. Nog was silent for a while, and then looked at everyone else and asked them not to worry, and that he would definitely be able to finish off this lone goblin himself. However, immediately after these words, a huge creature hatched from the egg. The other men were immediately surprised because they thought that such monsters did not live in this forest. Our hero, meanwhile, quickly jumped up and grabbed a branch, telling the others to quickly run away from here. The men realized that this gnome was right, and they needed to get away from here as quickly as possible while they were still alive. The goblin whom they tried to kill also began to run away, braiding it, and with the thought that he knew exactly what kind of egg it was. After all, it belongs to the guardian of the forest. Since childhood, they have been taught not to touch these eggs under any circumstances. He also thought that Nog knew this very well, and knew that the guardians of the forest would definitely have their eggs, but he decided to use it anyway. And the goblin also did not understand why his relative was in the company of these hunters. While they were running, one of the men fell on his stomach and was immediately lifted up by the spirit of the forest. His friend tried to stop, but the Goliath said that they should continue moving because this guy was definitely finished. Meanwhile, our hero was thinking that he summoned this monster only to prevent these vile hunters from killing his relatives and for fun. After all, they certainly did not deserve such a fate. While he was thinking about this, he heard the cry of one of the hunters who had fallen. He begged for help, but the beast had already swung its paw and was ready to finish him off with one blow. Nog could not ignore this, and used the acceleration skill to save this guy from the clutches of a huge monster. Goliath looked at our hero in surprise, and after a couple of seconds, the dwarf threw this man into the bushes and ordered him to run as quickly as possible, while Nog himself distracted this monster, and inside the goblin was thinking that the smell of an egg probably still emanated from him. A couple of minutes later, when the others had already run quite far, the forest spirit still kept up with our goblin, and at some second, our hero climbed onto a tree branch and asked the system what his chances of victory were. The system immediately responded briefly that it thinks that the chances of its owner are very small, and it thinks that saving this person will cost him at the cost of his own life. He looked at this huge monster again and analyzed it, learning that he was level 15, after which he stood up and said that it was a pity that everything would end like this. The guardian of the forest became enraged and began to pursue our hero again, not giving him a chance to escape. Nog dodged as best he could, and thought that the guardians of the forest had been protecting this forest for many centuries, and he could not believe that he would have to fight with this creature. But he decides that there is no way back. Our hero used 2 daggers to throw them at this huge monster. Both daggers hit him in the shoulders. After that, he used acceleration and swung another dagger to strike this creature in the stomach. As soon as his blade entered the flesh of this creature, he once again used acceleration to, by inertia, disembowel the spirit of the forest. After such a blow, the monsters became even more furious and swung their tail to strike our hero. Nog did not have time to dodge, and he was thrown deep into the forest, and his life scale was almost empty. As soon as he came to his senses, he immediately rose to his knees and said that he was not going to die here, and today only this forest spirit would die. After that, he tried again to pull off the same trick, but nothing worked, and the monster was clearly no stronger. After this realization, Nog used his harpoon to cling to a tree, thinking that he knew very well this forest can hide somewhere. He began to move away from this forest spirit and noticed an empty tree, deciding that this was a great place to hide inside. A moment later, he was already inside this tree and falling down, and the forest spirit tried to bite through, but his mouth got stuck in this tree. After this, our hero came out of another land of an empty tree and was surprised that it worked. However, a moment later, the forest spirit was able to destroy this piece of log, and immediately after that, he struck directly at our hero. The blow was so strong that the goblin lost consciousness, and the system ran up to its owner and asked him to wake up as quickly as possible because the monster was nearby. Suddenly, our hero's girlfriend appeared and delivered a direct hit right into the mouth of this beast. And after another couple of seconds, Nog came to his senses and saw that the girl was beating this huge monster. He looked at her in surprise. The goblin girl, meanwhile, screamed for this guy to run away as quickly as possible because this is his chance to escape. However, our hero once again used the acceleration skill to get close to this monster as quickly as possible. Inside, he thought that the girl had just saved him, so he was obliged to help her. After these thoughts, he plunged his blade straight into the neck of this monster at full speed. After that, he swung his blade to the side, cutting the veins on the monster's neck, while he thanked him for protecting this forest for so long. As soon as it was all over, the system congratulated our hero for completing the task and killing the guardian of the forest. He received 1,000 experience once. As soon as he read this notification, he realized that his strength was at its limit, and now he would turn off. And that's what happened. He continued to fall, but already in an unconscious state, and his girlfriend asked him to hold him. The girl looked at him with tears in her eyes and said that they would never part again. After that, holding him in her arms, she began to leave the forest with thoughts about why this guy always makes her worry about such trifles. And while our hero was passed out, the only thing in his head was that he was able to increase level. The girl took him to Rectoros, which was the southern goblin village. At this point, our hero regained consciousness, and as soon as he woke up, he immediately screamed. After that, he looked back in surprise because he didn't understand where she was, and saw that his girlfriend was standing nearby. The girl got scared and immediately dealt him a direct blow to the cheek. After a couple of minutes, she was already helping him get rid of the pain, saying that she didn't want to hit him so hard. Nog was clearly unhappy, and the girl said that he should thank her because she saved him after all. As soon as the morning first aid procedures were over, our hero opened the system to find out how much health he currently had. But as soon as he opened the system, he saw that he was able to increase his level to the 6th, and the system also notified him that he was able to unlock a new skill called Phantom. He immediately screamed with joy because he received a new skill, and his girlfriend waved her hand with the words that she warned him not to scream. Meanwhile, our hero was thinking that if he receives so many experiences, then this means only one thing: the guardian of the forest is already dead. After these thoughts, the elder came into our hero's room. The man looked at our heroes and said that one of the goblins had already told him everything, and he knew very well what happened last night. The elder looked at the goblin and said that he did not understand why he was in the company of these goblin killings. Nog put his hand on his heart and immediately began to say that he tried to stop them, but most likely said that he did not need any excuses. He was silent for a couple more seconds and asked our hero, is he really out of his mind once he decided to impersonate a hunter? He reminded Nog that of course he was able to save several goblins, but the price for it was too high, he said, referring to the dead spirit of the forest. Nog looked straight into the eyes of the older man, not yet braiding, and said that he had to call the guardian of the forest, because otherwise the hunters could have killed one of the goblins, and after he called the guardian, he decided to attack our hero, so there was no choice but to fight. Having listened to everything, this most likely hit the floor with his stick in displeasure with words from the house that our hero should not have been in that place at all. He grabbed his head and said that Nog's possession endangers his entire tribe because goblins and hunters are enemies, and he must kill it on his own nose. Nog finally endured the last bath. His cup of patience was overflowing, and he said that the elder simply did not understand anything. The elder looked into the eyes of this guy, and Nog began to say that he found out that they hunt goblins for various reasons, and they are not as bloodthirsty as everyone else here thinks. Once he finally figures out what the prophet hunters need from the goblins, he will find a way for everyone to live in the world. The elder listened to all this in silence and after a couple of seconds said that this was his last warning. After this, the elder turned around and said that if our hero continues to play hunter, he will no longer set foot on the territory of their settlement. But after half an hour, Nog and Gubble stood near the corpse of the guardian of the forest, fully dressed. The girl looked at our hero and asked, "Is he already planning to do what he wants and return to the guild?" Nog looked the girl in the eyes and said that he was very grateful that she saved him. But he also added that she should under no circumstances follow him, because he doesn't want her to be known too. After all, the village is theirs house. Goblin Girl sighed wearily and said that she had thought about it a lot. But after meeting some of the hunters, she seemed to begin to understand what our hero meant. And now she also thinks that maybe there is hope. Hope that the goblins and the bounty hunters will one day live in peace. So she will definitely go with our hero to the end and help him realize his dream. Nog stood and listened to this in surprise yesterday, and the girl added that now the dream belongs not only to him. Goliath, meanwhile, held the tail of the forest spirit on his shoulders and said that it was time to raise his level in the guild because he had become much stronger. All the other guild members looked at this and couldn't believe their eyes. The fire hunter thought for a bit and said that this was just an incredible feat, and then asked this guy if he was sure that they didn't help him pull off such a big murder. The man smiled and said that he had already told everything, because this monster suddenly appeared and attacked his group. Therefore, he had to kill this creature himself. The fire hunter raised his hand up and said, "Do you think he congratulates this guy, and he will be glad to see a demonstration of this skill on today's hunt?" After this, the Goliath noticed that the fire hunter began to leave somewhere and asked, "When did this guy go?" Tyro smiled and said that he wanted to go and wake up Nog and Gubble, because they must help them with the task. Goliath fell silent, but inside he thought that the so-called dwarf definitely did not come out after this fight. But suddenly his thoughts were interrupted because he saw that two gnomes ran inside the tavern and apologized for being so late. The girls asked them in surprise why it took them so long to get ready. And was it really that they were on a morning jog? To which Gubble replied with a smile that it was so. Golyak, meanwhile, looked at these gnomes in surprise and did not understand how this idiot who remained in the forest could survive after a fight with such a huge monster. The fire hunter, meanwhile, smiled and clapped and said that he was very glad that everyone had finally gathered. After that, he seriously looked at everyone and said that it was finally time for them to start the task. A couple of hours later, our hero's friend was indignant because they should carry the ammunition for everyone, because in her opinion, Edward should do this, because he is their debtor. To which our hero replied that everything is fair, because they were late. Goblin Girl looked down and said that they had personal matters and this is an excellent reason to make an excuse, to which Nog replied that the others do not know about it. After a couple more minutes, they finally entered a magic shop, and from the threshold, our hero said that they had come here to get an order for the Red Crows Guild. A girl was sitting at the counter who looked at the dwarves in surprise. The girl looked more like a witch, and was holding a wooden spoon in her hand with which she was stirring the potion in her cauldron. She also stated that this was the first time she had seen them, and did not believe them that they were from this guild. The so-called gnomes smiled and said that they were just new to this guild, and were sent here for the first time by the fire hunter. Immediately after these words, Goliath entered this tavern with the words that these buttons came here with him. The girl immediately smiled and moved away her kazan with potions, greeting this huge man with the words that he had not looked into her shop for a long time. The big guy looked her straight in the eyes and said that he came here because he assumed that she would not believe this of yours. After that, he looked at our hero and said that he had one question. Nog trembled with fear, and meanwhile the big guy asked him how he could survive after meeting the monster from class. The goblin began to smile and scratch behind his ear, saying that he just ran away from there and the monster did not pursue him. Goliath looked at him incredulously and asked if someone else had killed the monster. Goblin Undercover smiled and said that this was probably true. And after that, their conversation was interrupted by the owner of this place, who said that today's order for the Red Ravens Guild was already ready and they could pick it up. After that, she extended her hand and said that she would give the things back only after the money. The gnomes immediately grabbed their heads and said that they did not take money with them. Realizing the situation, the big man walked up to the counter and put down a bag of money, and said that today they would pay instead. The girl immediately began to smile and tell them to come here as soon as they wanted, and the dwarves rejoiced, because they had never seen only gold in their lives. Goliath, meanwhile, began to leave in the sense that this dwarf could not catch a single goblin on the hunt, so he definitely could not kill that monster. However, he remembered that this dwarf was extremely fast. The dwarf, meanwhile, looked at the witch and asked her if they knew she used goblin blood for these potions, to which the girl replied that for some of them, goblin blood was actually used because it is a standard ingredient for attack potions. After this information, our hero realized that for these hunters, any monster is an ingredient for a potion, or a component for weapons and armor. The witch, meanwhile, smiled and talked about her potions, adding that she even had remedies for indigestion. After that, our goblins returned to the guild, and after a couple of minutes, they were already heading at full speed on their pets towards the great boar to defeat him. As soon as they got close enough to the place, they saw that these mountains were full of pools of blood. Inside his legs, he was thinking that after he found out why hunters collect parts of goblin bodies, it seemed to him that nothing could ruin his day more. But now there is a terrible picture in front of him, and his day has definitely become many times worse than before. Goliath got down from his pet with the words that all these murders happened quite recently because the blood was still fresh. The girls behind said that it was real horror, and they didn't want to go there, and Gubble looked in surprise at the torn corpses. The fiery hunter thought a little and said that there was no time to find out what happened here, but in fact, they needed to move out quickly because they were wasting precious time. After that, he added that they would simply follow the trail of corpses and would definitely find the great boar. A couple more corpses later, they finally reached the place where the trail ended. All the hunters here began to say that it couldn't be that the boar just up and disappeared, and the fire hunter looked at his team and said that there were only 2 paths here, so he definitely couldn't go far and they would need to split up to find him. He looked at his companions and said that the gnomes, Arya and Laura would go with him to explore the peak, and those who remained will inspect the pass. After that, he looked at the alchemist's girl and said that if they noticed, they would have to use a signal flash. Everyone agreed to this plan, and the fire hunter turned around, declaring that they should meet here in 5 hours. Tyrus's group headed higher, but after a couple of turns they noticed that there was another fork and they would have to split up again. Suddenly, a system appeared that advised the goblin to use his analysis skill to find out where the boar was. The system began to explain to our hero that since he has upgraded this skill, he can now help track the monster they are looking for. Hearing this information, the goblin shouted at his system, and those who stood behind looked at this guy in surprise, asking why he was parodying Fight Club. After that, our hero calmed down and used the analysis skill to find out where their victim was. He was able to track the tracks but wondered why he hadn't seen them before, and the system immediately told him that these tracks were hidden from ordinary eyes. Nog immediately began to think that before he had never seen animals that were able to hide their tracks. He thought that all this was too strange, because the boar is not the kind of animal that would do such a thing. But he kept his thoughts to himself and raised his hand and pointed in one of the directions, telling the fiery hunter that their target was to their left. Tyros looked at our hero in surprise and asked if he was sure of this, because there were no traces anywhere, to which Nog shortly replied that they all had to trust him, because the boar was definitely there. Hearing this, the fire hunter laughed and said that he had no reason not to trust these new ones, so they would trust his intuition and go to that place. After a couple of minutes, they reached a cave and our hero began to talk about how their goal was right here, and the fire hunter began to warm up, saying that here they would not be able to move on their mounted dragons, so they would have to walk. But as soon as they went inside, they smelled rot, and found that the great boar was already dead, and next to his body stands the great monster of the local mountains, with a bloody face. It was an elite monster of the 27th level, and our heroes will definitely not be able to cope with it. A system immediately appeared that told its owner that he had never encountered monsters of such a high level, and this could end very badly for the goblin. Also, a notification appeared in front of our hero that he was afraid of this monster, so all his characteristics were reduced by 10%. Nog looked at his system in surprise and asked what it was, and the system explained that this was a regular debuff, and everyone in this cave became weaker. Having come to his senses, he noticed that the monsters were starting to run towards them, so he decided to use the acceleration skill to save his girlfriend. But she immediately gave him the police with the words that she did not need his help. The elite monster used its roar to stun our heroes, but the alchemist created a protective field. Inside this field, everyone immediately began to discuss that they needed to leave here because this monster was too strong and they did not sign up for this. The hunter looked at this huge monster with confidence and said that he should not say that he decided to refuse such a challenge. After that, he took out his blade and it caught fire, and the fire hunter expressed his joy because they were very lucky because it was a Class B monster and they could get a double reward for it. When he said this, he stood up in a fighting stance, also adding that they could not allow such a terrible monster to walk around these surroundings. Nog realized that Tyros did not realize how strong this monster was, and shouted that they should leave here anyway. The fire hunter, meanwhile, swung his blade and ran towards this monster, telling the dwarf not to be such a hysterical person and just help him kill this huge monster. Everyone else immediately ran along with the fire hunter to kill this monster, but our hero stood and shouted that this was a mistake. Goblin stood next to him with the words that they must definitely help. But Nog, meanwhile, just stood and watched as the fire hunter jumped on this monster. He thought that no one here understands how dangerous this elite monster is. A moment later, the monster struck straight at the leader of the group. Tyros, with a surprised face and incredible pain, flew into the nearest wall. After that, he fell to the floor and coughed up blood. All the other members of this group immediately realized that they could not win. Because their leader had fallen, the girl with the halberd took it as a personal insult and rushed at the giant. But after just a second, the monster tried to finish her off by stepping on her, and the girl was saved only by the fact that the alchemist was nearby, who summoned a shield. The monsters continued to put pressure on this protective field, and the girl said that she could not stand it for long. Meanwhile, the second group looked at the light from the cave with thoughts that the first group was able to find the great boar, so they need to go there and help. A self-confident Goliath, he calmly walked there with thoughts about what kind of boar it must be to cause such a strong tremor. Meanwhile, Tyros came to his senses and said with a smile that this was just great, because he had long ago surrendered such a strong opponent, and it would be real for him to escape from this lousy B-class monster. He took his blade in two hands and with the words, and then no matter how scared he is or how strong the enemy is in front of him, he is tired of fighting weak monsters for insignificant rewards, and he does not care how dangerous it will be because he needs to overcome his limit to become the strongest hunter. His sword burned brighter than ever, and the fire hunter shouted throughout the cave that he would kill this monster and become famous among the hunters. After that, he used his signature move, and with 3 blows he was able to cut through the skin of this monster. The goblins, meanwhile, because of such a battle, the place began to collapse, and Goblin immediately said that she would take the girls in her arms and take them out of here. Nog shouted to the hunter that it was time for them to leave, but he stood there and said that the previous attack should have finished off this monster. But he felt as if this did not happen, and as soon as it settled down, he saw that the huge hand of this monster was approaching him at great speed. A moment later, the fiery one found itself in the palm of the Lord of the Mountains. And after a couple of moments, the monster hit him on the ground with all his strength. At this time, the fire hunter thought that the troll had sacrificed his hand to protect himself from his previous blow. The fire hunter understood that he brought his friends here, and if they die today, it will be on his conscience, so he definitely cannot allow this. Along with these thoughts, his body temperature began to rise, and he screamed louder and louder. He finally found the strength to raise his left hand and throw this monster away from him. Tyros wanted to continue the fight, but our hero used the acceleration skill and grabbed him by the waist, instantly running away from this monster. The fire hunter looked at this gnome and asked what was happening, to which Nog replied that the hunters had already done everything they could, and now they only need to get out of here as quickly as possible. Immediately after these words, he used level 2 acceleration and ran out of this cave at full speed. The hunter, meanwhile, did not understand how this dwarf managed to move so quickly. As soon as they flew out of the cave, Goblin hit with all her might, the rock, and inside the cave began to collapse. Tyros and Nog watched the cave collapse, and our hero said that they met at a strange time in his life. However, he does not regret it, and is glad that everyone survived. A couple of minutes later, a Goliath approached with his group who asked in surprise, "Is it really all over?" After that, he looked at the 2 girls and saw that they were lying completely wounded, and Tyros sits without the usual smile on his face. The man did not understand what happened here, but his thoughts immediately ended when he heard the sound of broken stones. Everyone looked with fear as the monster destroyed the stones and got out of them, and Nog briefly answered that it was a monster that ate the boar. Tyros slowly stood up and with his head down said that the dwarf was right, and they would never be able to defeat this creature. So he invites everyone to leave here because it was the fire hunter who dragged them into all this, and it was he who was responsible for his actions. So I decided to hold him back as long as I could to save my friends. While he was saying this, the giant had already jumped out of the rock and landed near our heroes. Nog's fear completely disappeared, and he made a speech about how he knew what it was like to lose his friends, and he really hoped that if they could escape from this cave, they would be able to avoid situations where they would have to choose between themselves and their friends. But he was tired of doing that choice, so today he promises that they will all return home together. He looked at Goliath's group and said that while everyone was fighting with him, he came up with a plan on how to defeat this mountain king, but for this, they will all have to act together. Goliath took up his blade and said that now this dwarf will command everything. Nog briefly told them his plan and ordered everyone to take their places, while he sat down in a low position and asked his system to try a new skill. The system immediately said that it would activate it, and its phantoms began to appear around the gnomes. Everyone else looked at it in surprise and could not believe their eyes because they had never seen such tricks before. The Mountain King stood among the phantoms and was clearly puzzled. After that, with crazy eyes, he tried to kill absolutely every phantom. She and the hero thought that she would continue to irritate him with these illusions in order to lure him where he wanted. This plan bore fruit, and finally, in a mad rage, the Mountain King fell off the cliff in an attempt to catch up with the dwarf. Nog, meanwhile, used his grappling hook to grab onto one of the rocks. The monster's hand was practically next to him, and the monster was ready to grab this goblin. But he dodged and grabbed the rock and began to taunt this mountain monster and say that he would never in his life be able to catch up with the little gnome. But inside, our hero was thinking that this monster is very fast for his size. The monster screamed throughout the entire area and again rushed in pursuit. But Nog dodged each blow at great speed, and everyone else watched this, amazed at such dexterity. When the monster was almost at the right place, our hero shouted for everyone to get ready, and his partners began to look closely to find the right moment to attack. After another couple of seconds, our hero shouted for them all to destroy the rock, and each of his partners hit a huge rock when this monster was behind it, and because of this he was covered with stones. The Mountain King began to fall, and our hero breathed out a sigh of relief because it was very close. Everyone immediately began to rejoice and celebrate this victory, saying that it was simply incredible. However, their joy did not last long because the monster came back to life. He again climbed out of the rubble and shouted to the entire area. Nog, meanwhile, stood with the thoughts that he thought that this would not be enough to finish off such a huge monster. But he immediately said with a smile that he had prepared for this. After these words, he took out his blade and also added that in order to increase his level, he needed to deliver the finishing blow himself. Our hero bent down to jump and asked his system to invest all unallocated points in agility to upgrade his skill. Immediately after that, he jumped, and a notification appeared in front of him, saying that the skill leveling was completed and now he had expert acceleration of the 3rd level. Goliath watched with his mouth open as this goblin rushed straight towards the Mountain King at insane speed. Because of such enormous speed, our hero's mask fell off, but he didn't care anymore, and he swung his blade and prepared to finish off this monster. The monster prepared to counterattack, but did not even have time to move, and its head immediately fell from its shoulders. Immediately after this, he once again used acceleration to raise his mask, and no one saw that he was actually a goblin. But Goliath briefly asked others if anyone else had seen this moment. He said that he was ready to swear that despite the enormous speed, he noticed how the mask flew off his leg for a moment. The others started saying that they didn't see anything because this guy was moving too fast. After that, the big man looked at the fiery hunter and asked if he had seen anything, to which the man replied that his eyes were not able to follow such an insane speed. He also began to laugh and say that this gnome continues to surprise him with his abilities. Goliath was silent for a couple of seconds and confirmed these words, saying that summoning magic and super speed. It looks like it's something unnatural and this guy is simply incredible. Meanwhile, Nog took hold of his head because it hurt him due to the fact that he received many notifications that he had increased his level several times. And now his level was 10th, and he had also unlocked the skill of the merciless rogue of the 1st level. That same evening, our heroes celebrated this victory in one of the bars, and the girls said that they were very sorry that they were unconscious because they could not see all this with their own eyes. But Arya stopped to celebrate and asked if he really jumped off the cliff to increase his speed and how could he even survive after falling from such a height. In addition to all this, various people began to approach our hero and ask questions why he was not afraid when faced with such a strong monster and how he was able to call objects in the air to himself. Does he really have spatial magic? They also asked him how much gold they got for killing this monster. Nog had never been the center of such attention before and asked them to calm down and not ask so many questions because he was shy. People did not stop and asked him what it was like to be the first bounty hunter from the Red Ravens who was able to kill a Class B monster. Tyros, meanwhile, sat clearly depressed with the thoughts that he had exposed everyone to danger with his irresponsible command. And this dwarf was the only one who thought rationally, even in the face of this abomination. Tyros reasoned that he was going to become the best hunter, but the best hunter would never let his group down. Tyros remembered the dwarf, with the thoughts that the best hunter would always fight, despite his fear, and ensure victory for his team. Tyros was clearly confused and asked himself the question of what he had to do to become the same as this dwarf. After another couple of hours, the undercover gnomes decided to take a walk through the forest, and our hero talked about how they were able to get the approval of the bounty hunters. Gubble pointed her finger at him and said that only he received it. The girl looked at Nog and asked, "When did he learn all this?" Nog immediately began to prove to her that he had already told her everything and it was all his system. The girl grabbed her head and said that the guy was delirious again. But then she looked into his eyes and said that they were only here to understand why the hunters were killing goblins. This girl turned away and said that now her friend only cares about how to become stronger and show off in front of these people. But she also said that she understands everything because they are nice, and it's very nice when they really appreciate you because this is how they differ from the inhabitants of their hometown. The girl reminded him that they always bullied him and said that all his inventions work and this guy is a real weakling. The girl stopped a little, and then again looked straight into our hero's eyes and asked him not to forget that if these hunters find out who they really are, they will obviously have a hard time. The girl took off her mask and said that they would be killed at the first opportunity, like any other monster. Nog got scared because the girl took off the mask and immediately put it back on her, saying that he would now try to explain his point of view to her. She didn't listen to him and said that she very much doubted that these hunters were really their friends. Nog looked at her in surprise, and she asked him not to forget who they are by nature, but the goblin replied that the more time he spends with them, the more convinced he is that it is possible to live in peace. And one day he will be able to prove this to everyone. He beat himself in the chest and said that goblins and hunters could someday become friends. The girl snorted with displeasure and said that her friend had always been so stubborn, but if he wants it so bad, then so be it and she won't leave him. After some more time, our hero was finally left alone and began to talk to you out loud, rejoicing in the fact that when he killed this troll, he immediately gained several levels. And he also discovered another useful skill, and this despite the fact that quite recently he gained the Phantom skill. But then a system appeared that said that its owner did not even know how to use these skills correctly. After that, a notification appeared in front of him that the skill Merciless Hunter allows you to temporarily transfer characteristic points to an object or creature. Nog was delighted and picked up a small pebble, saying that he would now check it. He charged it with 10 agility points and threw this stone at the tree, breaking the tree into splinters. The system warned him to be careful with this skill, but our hero asked her to be silent and shouted to the whole forest that he wanted to become even stronger than ever, to which the system replied that in this case the owner should train more. A couple more days passed and the news of the Red Raven's victory over the mountain troll spread very quickly. And this was the first time that hunters from this city killed a Class B monster. For this reason, this guild began to receive quests from other cities, and the Red Crows took their eyes off the goblins of this forest, leaving them alone. Each of the hunters then remembered how scary the Mountain King was, so they felt constant anxiety and the need to become stronger. 2 months later, our heroes were resting after the next task, and had as much fun as they could under the starry sky. But suddenly a voice was heard from below, saying that the head of the guild had decided to convene everyone, saying that it was very urgent and asked these gnomes to go to the dining room, also stating that it was necessary to come in full uniform. Gubble looked at her new gloves and wondered what the head of the guild needed at such a late hour. After that, they all gathered in the dining room, and the head of the guild stated that, as they all know, in recent months the Red Crows Guild has risen high in the ranking of guilds. He began to talk about how they have worked very hard since the founding of the guild, and it seems that their efforts have finally... Then they were noticed, and rumors about the rising guild spread quickly. After these words, a short man appeared and said that for this reason he came from the kingdom of Crowmore on behalf of the king to find talented hunters. Next to him were 2 country-dressed people who looked arrogantly at this guild. And Grandpa said that they were looking for hunters, with one condition: this hunter must survive the Class A mission. Nog looked around and inside he thought that this was very strange because this is the most powerful empire in the world and they really came to this guild. The messenger, meanwhile, announced that he would now read out a list of names, and those named would have to step forward because the king decided that they were worthy. The first to say the name of Tyros, the second was Goliath, and the rest of their group, they even said about Gabble. And at the very end, the man announced that the last of those summoned would be Nog. That same evening, Gubble threw a tantrum and told Nog that serving the human empire was too much. He looked at the girl and said that he understood her concern, but he also said that this was their chance to look at the world outside of this city. The goblin collected things and said that if they want to make the goblins and the bounty hunters live in friendship, then they should try to get to know their world better, and besides, this is a good chance for them to become even stronger. Gubble immediately grabbed his hand and asked, "Is he talking?" The girl said that he had gone crazy and was going to risk his life, and not only his own, for some human task of rank A. She also said that they did not owe anything to these people. Tears began to appear in her eyes, and she said that recently our main character has changed a lot and he only thinks about how to become even stronger. After these words, he pulled his hand out of her palm, and he looked at her menacingly with the question, "What's wrong with the fact that he wants to become stronger? After all, if he becomes even stronger, then he wants to protect all the goblins." The goblin girl was already sobbing and screaming loudly that they started all this in order to understand why people attack goblins. Nog shouted back at her that this was the case and this was his plan. The girl was already hysterical, and with tears in her eyes, she asked why they should take risks if he doesn't even remember why they started all this. Her legs gave way and she asked, what would happen if he died on this mission? After that, she wiped away her tears and asked him what she would do if this did happen. Nog realized what he had done and tried to say something, but could only stretch out his hand and call her name. Well, the girl had already turned away and said that she would do as he wanted. After that, she took out her mask and said that this would be their last joint task, after which she would leave him and go home. The next morning, they went to the kingdom, and Nog spoke with surprise that he thought their city was impressive, but this city was on a completely different level. After that, they finally arrived. And one of the hunters said that the gnomes should stay close because small things like them usually get lost in the crowd and then cannot be found. Fire Hunter laughed and asked his friend to stop scaring them because he teases them too often, to which the Goliath replied that he was just joking. The Fiery Hunter caught fire and said that this guy must face someone comparable in size to him. They will drive the barrel on the weak. Goliath also lit up with his aura and said that they would definitely fight together when they returned to their hometown, to which the Fire Hunter replied that this guy would not last a single second in this fight. The girls looked at this and said that these guys are strange because they will never understand what is in their heads and why they get along with each other. One of the girls said that, in her opinion, sometimes rivals make a good team. After that, all the hunters headed to the main hall, called the Sapphire Dragons Guild Hall. A girl who is a hunter of rank came out. She looked at all the hunters and said that they should pay attention to her. The girl said that they must understand that this is a very dangerous task. If they are careless, they can endanger their lives or, even worse, the lives of the people around them, and she is not going to allow such an attitude in her team. Her face changed to a more menacing one, and she briefly replied that they would need to concentrate and be careful or get out of here because otherwise they would be severely punished. After this, the girl, accompanied by two strong hunters, said that now she would explain the essence of the task. She began her story about how the orc civilization was conquering and plundering the villages of their allies, and because of which, just last month, more than 1,000 civilians were killed and hundreds of people were kidnapped. Therefore, the king ordered them to immediately deal with this militant threat, and after the first group of bounty hunters sent by them was destroyed, they assigned this building the highest rank, and if they consider themselves worthless or incompetent, then they should do themselves a favor and leave here before everything will begin. She also said that Slovaks are not welcome here either, because she does not want to waste her time searching for their bodies after the failure of this mission. She also said that after this, she conveys her word to the strategist of this mission and ordered to listen to him carefully, or she herself will personally finish them off. Nog remembered that orcs never got along with goblins, so now is not the time to be afraid, and he will be able to strike at his enemies because he has become stronger than ever now. Our hero was level 23, and he became incredibly strong. The girl who was leaving noticed our hero and thought that this guy was very interesting. After that, she smiled and acted as if she had not seen anything. The next day, they went to the kingdom of the orcs, and Nog looked at all this and asked in surprise, "Are they going to invade here?" Because it all reminds him of something else. But he discarded these thoughts because he decided that this attack was necessary despite how peaceful they look, because orcs are cruel monsters and everyone knows that they attack everyone, even goblins. But he still had doubts in his soul, and the fire hunter approached our hero and asked, Why was he nervous? They looked at the orc settlement with words that it was very difficult to prepare for this. However, the man smiled and said that the dwarf was always very good at fighting monsters. Tyra said that the way this dwarf looks fear into the eyes has always inspired him. And today they have a very important task. Therefore, he has something that he must give to the dwarves. Tyros handed it to our hero as a gift and said that, as I expected from a dwarf, he is a magnificent inventor. But also the fire hunter noticed that he fights like an assassin. He opened the gift and said that he specially ordered a weapon for our hero, taking into account its features, and asked Goblin to measure this coverage so that it would be a gift and a surprise. He also said that he hoped that the dwarf would appreciate the comfort of this weapon. Also, the fire hunter said that he understands that he is a stranger for only a few months. But today's task is very dangerous, so he thought that it would be nice to give a useful gift to one of his good friends. Under the mask, our goblin cried and said that he would definitely find a way for everyone to live in peace. But suddenly, he didn't say this. These thoughts only flashed through his head. The dwarf came close to the fiery hunter and hugged him with all his might. He thanked him for everything. But the fire hunter laughed and said that it was too early to thank someone because they first needed to see how he could use this weapon in battle. After a couple of minutes, the orcs looked up and saw huge human ships above them. And the main one on this mission said that the invasion of this city begins right now. Immediately after this, hunters began to pour out of their airships and they all used a smooth fall spell to carefully descend. Oh, you immediately took up your weapon with the thought that they were under attack. And our heroes were also involved in this. Nog thought that everyone knew that the orcs had thousands of prisoners, so it would not be possible for them to find all these people. However, while he looked at how the city was being destroyed, he thought that this all reminded him very much of something, and it all looked more like a massacre. One of the most powerful orcs used spells and erased half of the hunters who attacked his hometown. He raised his sword and said that the hunters decided that they had the audacity to attack them on their own land, and this was not forgivable. The commander of this mission used a spell with the words that, as expected, the orcs had a numerical advantage, but she did not think that they were strong enough to give them a worthy rebuff. However, she took her huge object, which didn't even look like a weapon, and said that she was here precisely to clear out this whole crowd. After that, the girl jumped down and used the ice meteor skill, and her system was sitting next to her. She landed and there was a huge explosion. Our bounty hunters couldn't believe their eyes because they had never seen such a strong girl before. However, after that, their gaze fell on the fact that this task was more like an ordinary massacre. The fire hunter believed that the orcs were the culprits of all the troubles and incredibly strongly merged with them. He wanted to join the battle, but he was stopped by Nog, who said that there are too many of them here, and if they attack now, then everyone will die. The fire hunter looked at the gnome and said that he could not sit idly by because he was tired of watching his comrades die. Nog reminded the hunter that they were given a specific task, and they are obliged to adhere to it, because to focus on the rescue mission, this is also the main goal of the dwarves, and said that he knows how it feels to see his comrades being killed, so he fully understands Tyrus's feelings. Nog looked into the eyes of the fiery hunter and said that he knows very well that they will not be able to save all the hunters, but if they complete the task, they will save a lot of good people, and this is better than being left with nothing. Goliath listened to all this and said that he really didn't want to admit it, but the short guy was right and there were too few of them. So if they poke their nose in there right now, they would die that very second. The healer shouted that if they free the prisoners, then perhaps they will help them turn the tide. But Tyros had already lost his mind and hysterically asked whether they would allow these orcs to finish off their friends. Nog saw his friend for the first time, furious and couldn't believe his eyes. Their argument was stopped by the captain of this task, and asked why the group was still hanging around at the outer gate. She also noted that the guys had not moved at all. The fiery hunter, meanwhile, looked madly into the void with the thought that he did not understand what the difference was. The girl with blue hair continued to walk forward and said that she would attract the attention of the orcs and take them to the western part of the city. She also said that she would reduce the number of opponents on their way. Tyros, meanwhile, continued to experience an internal crisis with thoughts that he really did not understand what the difference was between him and this girl. He was tired of just standing and looking at her and suddenly shouted for her to stop. The woman didn't even look at him and said that she wasn't going to wait for such a weakling. After that, she used level 4 acceleration and moved away from this guy at full speed, saying that they were obliged to adhere to her plan. Nog looked in surprise at how she had just used the acceleration skill, and the fire hunter quickly said that he would go right after her. Goblin immediately shouted that the captain had just said that they had to complete their task, and now there was no time for that. The guy looked down and said that they would not understand what he was experiencing now. He remembered how, as a child, monsters devoured his parents in front of his eyes, and his eyes became bloodshot. He looked madly at everything and said that he would definitely destroy absolutely every monster, and he absolutely didn't care who stood in his way. Immediately after that, he jumped and moved away from this group, and Nog tried to stop him. But he was stopped by the fire and said that there was no need to do this because, at the sight of all these murders, the fire hunter probably awakened something inside himself because the Goliath is familiar with this crazy look. He immediately said that he had seen this guy look like that a couple of times, and it was only when he was very upset about his own powerlessness. He also said that, although he is a great guy, now he is no different from the monsters he wants to kill. However, the man noticed that this is the same Tyros. Therefore, everything will definitely be fine with him. But for now, they need to quickly complete this rescue operation, and then they will be able to help him get out. One of the hunters said that due to the fact that they are outnumbered, the battle with them has to be drawn out, so shock troops are moving through the city. However, another hunter immediately said that the captain intervened in this massacre and said that she would concentrate all the enemy forces in the west, so they could go along the eastern side and there would certainly be fewer orcs there. Nog, meanwhile, thought that they were all wrong, because if the captain concentrated the orcs in the western part, this meant that all the enemies from the eastern side would pass through this place, and they would be in the very center of the massacre. And in front of his face it appeared in the room that the perception skill was warning the main character that he was now in danger. Suddenly, an orc with 2 heads appeared, destroyed the nearest house and said that he promised to kill the captain of this detachment. All the hunters immediately looked at him and asked in surprise what kind of creature was this near them now. Nog, meanwhile, was thinking that everyone knows that orcs and ogres are in an alliance, but it is not clear what the ogres are doing in this city right now. Meanwhile, the ogres looked at each other and said that there was something wrong with these so-called gnomes, because they smelled very familiar, and it looked like something they had recently eaten. The hunters, meanwhile, rushed to run away from these huge elite monsters to the nearest tavern. The ogres said with a smile that there was no way in life that these idiots would be able to just run away from here. After that, they immediately rushed into the house they ran into, the hunters, and stepped on a homemade mine. After this, an incredibly strong explosion occurred. The rest of the orcs looked there in surprise and asked if it was a spell, but noted that no one felt any use of magic and it seemed like it was caused by something else. Nog, meanwhile, thought that this explosion was much stronger than that of his previous prototype. The ogres remained unharmed and asked in surprise, "Did these idiots really think of making a bomb?" Nog tried to attack them, but they immediately grabbed him and asked if he did it all. Nog said with a smile that he didn't want to disappoint these beautiful giants. But it wasn't just him, and immediately after that, all the other hunters attacked the surprised monsters and attacked them simultaneously. The attack was successful, and one of the heads was already dead, and the second arm was also cut off. The ogre, in a rage, tried to kill our hero, but he was immediately saved with the help of a protective spell. Goblin and Goliath immediately rushed to finish off this ogre, and together they finished off this monster. The ogre looked at his brother with tears and begged him to wake up, said that he had to wake up because he could not forget how much they had lost because of these hunters. He remembered that they had wasted a lot of years because of these greedy bastards, so they couldn't just die now like idiots. After all, together they were supposed to conquer the whole world. Immediately after this, someone finished off the ogres with the words that they deserved to die with honor. Purple fireballs began to rain down on the city, and our heroes were surprised to say that the amount of mana required for such a number of balls must be simply incredibly huge. Nog used analysis to find out who cast this spell, and found a strange orc. Org noticed that he had been analyzed and said that it was very interesting that someone could see him. After this, the orc got angry and rushed at the hunters with his spells. It was the Orc Emperor, the highest level 58 monster. At that same second, Nog lost consciousness after casting an incredibly powerful spell. He woke up when some orc was dragging him by the leg. A system immediately appeared that asked its owner how he was feeling. The owner replied that judging by the smell of his health, he thinks that he is still alive. But his head hurts incredibly bad, and he needs to get out of here as quickly as possible. Immediately after this, the orcs who were dragging our hero were immediately killed. It was a Goliath who finished them off with his flail, and said that he had had enough of the arrogance of these idiotic orcs. After all, they were no better than the vile goblins. Nog looked at this hunter in surprise, and the big man looked down, surprised, but also said that this little guy was better than no one. Nog looked at Goliath and asked if he had found the others. To which the big man replied that it was unrealistic while fire rain was pouring from the sky. He also said that it would be stupid to stay here because the area is infested with vile orcs, so he thinks that they have already left and they need to get out of here too. Nog asked his friend in surprise where he was going to go. Goliath looked at the hunter and said, "Has he really decided to lose everything here?" And also added that his questions are stupider than the damned goblins. Goliath said that they must finish off the bastard who is hiding in the castle and is the emperor of the orcs. Nog noted that in his opinion this is their leader, and the big guy agreed that it would be problematic to save the prisoners while he was bombarding the city with this fiery rain. After this, the thug smiled and asked our hero if he wanted to go straight to the powerful boss to cut off his head. She and the hero, meanwhile, thought that they had never gotten along and the mere presence of this thug made his blood boil, as well as how he and said they don't have the luxury of choosing allies. So against such brutal enemies as these orcs, they have to act together, and he needs all the help he can get. After that, they high-fived each other and said that they would definitely do all this and destroy the incredibly powerful monster. Meanwhile, the team captain continued to rush around the city and kill orcs in her way. She noticed that a fire hunter had appeared near her and menacingly asked him what he was doing here, because she told him to free the prisoners. To which he replied that she said that a lot of hunters were dying on the battlefield and the group needed help. The woman continued to kill goblins and said that his ego just wants to hear that he is strong, and his help is worth something. But she doesn't need him to help Group A, because he is needed in the rescue operation with Group B. The woman looked into his eyes and said that this is where all the strength lies, because the strong is not the one who fights on the front line with enemies, but the one who uses his strength to help others. That's what distinguishes the great hunters from the rest. After that, the woman turned around and reminded him that thousands of innocent prisoners needed saving, but he decided to use his power to kill the orcs. After that, the woman left and left a broken fiery hunter who thought that he did not understand why he was fighting. Because if great hunters are different from others in helping others, then it turns out that he was looking at everything from the wrong angle. And it turns out that, compared to his friends, he is far from being as great as he previously thought. He ran up to Captain Rayon again and stopped next to her. They stood back to back with each other, and he asked her to clear the way for him because the woman was right, and he shouldn't be here because now he should be with his friends. The captain smiled under her mask and said that she was very glad that this guy decided to change his mind, and also called him Mr. Hothead. But she also said that he did not need to think that a one-time decision would immediately make him a great hunter. The girl began to use a spell and say that she would clear the way so that he could save the prisoners. But if he let her down again, she would personally kill him.